I hope you enjoyed the little look at the railway in the rain. It's been horribly, awfully wet in New South Wales this week, so no other video of outside. So we're inside in my little man cave den with the Supermax mod on the GoPro to make it a bit more interesting, and we're going to have a little tour through the trains and rolling stock and engines of the railway. So first up is the first engine that I built. Hold on. There we go. This started life as a Pico little tug engine thing, which you actually just saw in the previous images outside. It's the blue thing. It is the engine block underneath, and then basically a balsa wood body, which is all held on with this foam stuff in the bottom, so it just friction holds it on. Inside, they were originally built as to take power from the tracks, but I removed that and put batteries in, and also added some remote control gear, and there is a link in the description of this video with links to that company. It's built on the idea that anything looked at from like 3 meters away is going to look like a train, so when it gets up close, the the engineering quality and the modelling quality falls off pretty quickly. But when it's trundling away down the garden, you don't really see. It was also built to be made as cheaply as possible. So it's balsa wood, kind of standard like acrylic paints you can buy or from Target or Kmart in Australia, but you know, any kind of sort of dollar or pound store type thing. It's got some of my patented paperclip hooks to connect to other carriages. But yes, this is, I would say, probably the primary engine. And it has the VLR little thing on the side. Now, along with the Pico starter train, I got some of these wagons, which originally had grey like hoppers on top, which are now sat next to the little siding on the railway. One of them I left like this, but added on these 2 rails, and hilariously in Australia they're called witches' hats, but these traffic cones to it, and it basically is the right width to hold a bottle of beer, because originally the idea is it to be a beer train. I don't always have enough beer here, so I have this weight that was left over from the original model train, which sits in there because otherwise it's a bit light and gets derailed going over the turnouts and the points. I gave it a bit of a brush over with sort of black and brown paint to make it look a little bit less plasticky and give it a bit of weathering. But yes, this sits there with a beer on and goes round. The next 2 little carriages are basically built on these wheels, which are the bogies off of the larger wagon I just showed you, and I wanted to basically have a bit more rolling stock, and because of the scale of the railway, smaller 4-wheel carriages, wagons, is better. So this is just built out of yogurt sticks, which I then sort of stained with just like acrylic paint, and I added a GoPro mount. This is just stuck in, so whenever you see the shot of the back of a train going round, generally it's mounted on this. But I also just sit GoPros on top of the train itself because it doesn't really fall off. And these little wheat packs I bought from, and they actually say Bargo Wheat Cooperative on which I've just dropped, I'll find that later, which is where the model shop is, in Bargo. So yes, that's there. Then another little carriage. This one I filled up with stones from around the railway, again to sort of weigh it down. The little bumper ends are actually, they're the mounts off of a CPU fan for a computer, which we had extra of. So they're basically just chopped up, glued on and painted a bit red. As you can see, they come off a bit easy. So, you know, again, this is all meant to be built very cheaply. It's not meant to look like a real railway. This whole railway is very prototypical anyway, because, you know, it is what it is. It's just something to pull stuff round. Next is what I call the engineer train. Now this was meant to be started off to be controlled by a Raspberry Pi and all these things, and it got more and more simple and simple and simple. And actually I have to say now, because my track is not completely level and everything else, this little IP engineering sort of chassis and motor that it's built on is not really good enough to be resilient enough to go up and down the very small gradients on my railway. So I think I'm actually going to repurpose this as some kind of brakes wagon at the end to be sat behind the little steam engine, which I'm going to show shortly, because when that goes around, it goes around at a rate of knots. And I think if this was at the very back end of the wagons it was pulling with a bit of weight on it, it would slow it down. It would also stop all the wagons and stuff compressing like this as it goes round. Yep, so just made a plasticard, which I've just cut out, and then it's sprayed with basically like hammerite paint. Yes, so this is good fun doing this. It's got the little man in it, which is probably the only little man I'm going to have on the railway, because that isn't really why I got into the railway. What else is cool about this? Oh, there's a little light on the front. I don't know if you've seen those solar powered lights that you can stab in the ground. Well, that's the bulb out of one of those and the little controls, and that just runs off the same battery pack. It's wired in parallel, I think. Anyway, yes. And yep, spray paint, Sharpie markings on the front and the back. Very crude, does not hold up to up close inspection, but again, when it's going around a track at distance, absolutely fine. Along with that little IP engineering engine, I bought 2 of these little IP engineering wagons as well. I have not yet painted these. They were going to go around behind the engineering wagon and have maybe another GoPro mount on and everything else, but I think now they're just going to get rolled into the main train when it goes round, either pulled by the steam engine, which I'm about to show you, or by the little tram. These, I did buy some of these very tiny and very losable links, which work brilliantly, but they're a bit expensive and they fall off. So a lot of the time I just bend up paper clips to link between these little copper hoops that sit at the back, and they go around the right. But again, these are very light, so on my railway, any kind of lumps or bumps on the track or going over the points, they don't do very well. So I'll need to ballast these up with something as well, so maybe they won't get used that much. Last, but by no means least, is this, which is a ruby made by AccuCraft, and she has been seen a lot on the channel, generally with me almost setting fire to myself or wondering why the gas burners are not working or things like that. She is the cheapest live steam train that I think you can actually get in Australia without having all the knowledge and nous to build one yourself. So this is this. I think eventually, because they're sort of designed to be kit bashed, so eventually I will run her like that and build a little body for myself to go on to sort of fit more with the sort of mountain railway slash narrow gauge feel of the VLR, but at the moment she's quite happy just to run like this. Yes, that is all the rolling stock. Now I should say that my railway is 45mm track, so G gauge scale. Next week I will go into the scale versus gauge thing. So these are all G spaced wheels and wagons. Wheels and wagons? Whatever. So yes, that's the scale. which is fine. Perhaps if I was going to do it again and I didn't live in Australia, I would actually run on 32mm, because I think that's more of the vibe that I would like to go for. But for Australia, which is far away and doesn't have a great history of narrow gauge model railways, 45mm is the best. So yes, that is a very unplanned and unsexy outside view, little run through of the wagons on my railway. And hopefully it will clear up raining over the weekend, and then next week's video I'll be able to actually talk about gale and skage. Gale and skage? Skage and gale, with some actual examples outside. So yes, thank you for watching, and remember, choo choo.